Today on Good Morning BSN, we are going to be talking about cultural alignment, the role of leaders in shaping company culture. This topic is also under responsible leadership and partly under performance leadership. And today we have with us to discuss this amazing topic, we have Uchechi Agwu to speak with us about this today. Uchechi is the founder and managing consultant of Culture Keepers Consulting Limited. She's an experienced consultant and trainer. It's an honor to have her here today to share with us. And after she has finished her presentation, we will have questions from the audience and also have reflections on what she has shared. It is my pleasure to welcome you, Uchechi. Uchechi, you're here with us. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for making our time. I see my camera needs to change a bit. So we will sort that out in a bit. But welcome, Uchechi. Over to you.
Good. Thank you very much. Good morning, BSN. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Dr. Okay. It's good to see you be on the call. Okay, I'll be going straight into today's session. And let me just share my screen. All right. So I'm sharing my experience with us today on the role of leaders in shaping company culture. And I want to start out with a story. I chose to title it, "It Happened to Me." This is an experience that I had in an organization where I worked some decades back. Now, I came into this organization, and it's a very well-structured organization. Very clear on policies, very clear on procedures. You know, everyone was held accountable for doing the right thing, only the right thing, no compromises. And when I came in, I also I had sales and service responsibilities, and I had to work with some direct sales agents. Now, these direct sales agents would source accounts, initiate transactions, and then they could take it wherever the client wanted. So they had access to different branches. So because we were in the same catchment area, I would get to see many of those transactions and prospective clients, and some of them just didn't cut it. They did not meet the business requirements, and they would stand rejected. But I would be surprised when after a while it would surface in another branch. And I wonder what's going on. Did the transaction change? Did the fundamentals? I mean, I knew that there were items that just could not be corrected because they were fundamentally against the policy. Okay, after a while, there were so many accolades for this other leader, and promotions even came. And so at a point, she became a metrics manager to me, you know, leading the particular segment where we were working. And I then got some insight into her spirit as a leader. And I would hear things like, you have to work smart and not hard. And I wondered. And then I began to see that there was a whole lot of unethical practices going on. And I was shocked. But the major reason I was shocked was that how was all this getting through? And this person is getting all the standing ovations, is supposed to be the model to follow. And then I began to realize that right from the top, there was a very strong goal orientation that management really didn't care how the results came through. All they wanted were the results. And so the actions were speaking much louder than any words. Now, as a segment leader, she had her A team, I would call them, and every single one of them behaved like her. Every single one of them, without exception. They were high performers. Let's make no mistake about that. They were high performers. They were also very unruly, very disrespectful, readily telling lies. I mean, I'm talking of telling lies to clients to the point where their fees, significant fees, sometimes in hundreds or even thousands of dollars, and they manage not to mention it. And sometimes investments are not capital protected, and they pretend it is just because they know the client probably will not read through the very fine lines. At the end of the day, every one of those group of people got promoted. They were very greedy. They were very selfish. Many of them were fighting with their managers when they tried to balance their transactions inwardly. And I wondered to myself, I was penalized for acting right. Make no mistake, I always met my numbers and actually exceeded them. But because I did not adopt her basic character, her own ethics, she always felt I was pulling down her segment. I should be delivering more if only I could behave like that. And for not behaving that way, I got penalized. I was bypassed on everything bypassable. So what did that tell me about that organization? For everything that they stood for everything that they stood for, I had a very different experience. So let me go to my first slide. How do leaders impact on the culture of a company? Number one, the core of your company culture is the relationship that individuals have with their immediate leader. For all I knew, for as long as I worked in that segment with that leader, that was all I could perceive about the organization. And it did not help that I saw that she was getting rewarded and everyone in her group was getting rewarded. And I was being penalized even for wearing my hair the way I'm wearing it today, not wearing high heels, not using makeup, because, I mean, leaders are the first line of defense for your company culture. They are responsible for living and enforcing the company's values. And if they are not doing so, if employees cannot see your company values, your ideals, your ideas, if they cannot be seen in your leader, then there's no culture. All that is available is just the leader's behavior. That is all that employees can relate with. And it could easily be at variance with what, let me say, ownership believes. Another interesting finding is that only 15% of organizations succeed in transforming their cultures. And what this tells me is that we don't need to deceive ourselves. We don't wake up from sleep to change culture, because, as we will see in the next slide, culture is so deep. Culture, from my personal experience and various research findings, it's a congregation of individual behaviors and core values. So it's very difficult. This research is a February 2024 research by the Institute for Corporate Productivity that says only 15% of organizations succeed in transforming their cultures. Now, looking at this next slide, it tells a story. Culture is very deep-seated. Culture is very deep-seated. Culture is beyond the way we say we do things. Culture can be hard to pin down. And much of what happens in an organization's culture is really under the surface. It's under the surface. So we have our services, our products, our walls are typically littered with the values that we uphold as an organization. But the question this morning is, are employees really living the values? Where are they picking the values that they are living from? And what is the consequence ultimately for your organization? The way we actually get things done, the things that are most important to us as an organization, ultimately drive everything that happens. The way we do things, the way we operate towards achieving our goals. So it's not just that we've laid down goals, but how far will we go in doing this? Because the leaders' actions will always speak louder than words. What they believe, their assumptions, the perceptions and the attitudes, the informal interactions. You know, remember, I said I was getting penalized even for being honest with my clients. And I was literally hated for getting referrals because my satisfied clients would always refer me. And when they did, it was a problem. It was an issue because they felt that I should be out, you know, hustling and sweating, you know, telling lies and, you know, so they couldn't understand that my results could match up with theirs. So culture is really beyond what we see on the surface. So talking about how leaders shape culture. When leaders align, all systems push employees in the same direction. If I go back to my story, you would see that when those direct sales agents appeared in that branch with those documents that didn't meet up, those transactions that didn't meet up, it meant that all across the chain, people had to become unethical to actually fulfill those transactions. Someone had to compromise. Certain approvals which should not have been granted may have been sought and granted. So you come to a meeting, and by the way, I saw a research probably this morning or yesterday that said that 60% of leaders lie purposefully. Now, this is the belief of most employees, that leaders lie purposefully because they want to manipulate. You know, so someone somewhere would have either made a promise or something which they never intended to fulfill just to meet the numbers. So whichever way leaders align, all systems will push in that direction, whether it's ethical or it's unethical. In the same way, leadership influences leadership transforms. When, as an employee, you have your eyes on your progression in the organization, you also want to be mindful how you align, because some people naturally aligned. Either they were pressured to, or they found an easy way. They needed to be friends with the boss. It was important to align with the boss because there were perks, and as we will see when we talk about how culture gets misaligned, you see that the rewards and the discipline that we're ready to met out as leaders they transform, they influence the way employees behave in an organization. Now, the leader's ethics naturally become the culture. The leader's ethics naturally become the culture. Leaders are role models. Everything they do is modeling the culture of the organization. And when they live the core values of the organization, not just having them written on our walls, then everybody aligns because they know that this will not work. Now, culture is basically transferred by imitation and adoption. So employees will typically adopt the language, the thought, they're able to think exactly the way their leaders think. I just remembered someone who had worked with me went, did a master's and came back, and on her return, she had an interview, and one of the panelists was someone that we all worked together. And the lady saw me after and she said, Uche, your girl was at the panel today. You would have thought you were the one there. Anyone hearing her would have known that this one is your girl. That's how she put it, because she could think like I would. Her approach to answers, to questions was just like she had learned from me. So there's no way leaders do not influence the culture. They certainly do. And so the other thing that I'm looking at this morning is, how does culture get misaligned? How does culture get misaligned? Number one is the leader's instinctive approach to solving problems. Remember, we've said that culture is very deep. When we talk values, when we talk ideas, it is beyond that of the organization. It's a collection of everybody's values. So what is the leader's instinctive approach to solving problems? When there's a problem, what do you do? How do you handle it? Is it time to tell a lie to get it? Is it time to change the figures? Is it time to... What is the instinctive approach? It's fine when nothing is happening, but when things begin to fall apart and the center is no more holding, how do you approach it? If I may use...
Uchechi, sorry to interject. We're already out of time. I might really apologize. So could you please help to wrap up? Thanks.
Sure. All right. So culture gets misaligned when we reward wrong and fail to discipline, when we reward the wrong behaviors and fail to discipline, and when we do not pay attention in our talent practices. Our recruitment, we must aim to recruit for culture alignment, because when you bring someone who is not aligned with your desired culture, then you're not going to have what you're looking for, because they will come in and they will infiltrate. But if you're stronger and if you have the upper hand, then you may be the one to get them out. All right, so I'll stop there for now, Dr. Kerr.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Uchechi. Really appreciate your amazing contribution towards cultural alignment, the role of leaders. We have with us as well Mr. Yinka Folami, who is going to give us some reflections on this topic. Yinka, over to you just for a few minutes before we take questions from the audience. Yinka?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Okay, and thank you very much, Dr. Okay. Let me start by apologizing for joining late. I'm having connection problems, and I had to do an urgent travel out of my base yesterday. Even though that's an excuse, I really deeply apologize. Yeah, in spite of that, I have been through Uche's work, and I have also listened to her now. I think that you are quite a clear presenter, and I also believe that the culture, the topic is a relevant one. The reason why I say it's a relevant one is because particularly where we are at in Nigeria today, and I'm sure Dr. Oke and Uche can understand why I say that. I agree. The central theme of your presentation, I agree. So the first thing I was looking for is, will the culture of a company derive from the character of the leader? I believe that is what you mean. I believe that is what you mean when you say that there's a relationship between the leader's ethics and the culture of the company. Because I run a small business myself, and I know that the culture of my business generally derives from my character and from the role that I play in the company and from the way I communicate with my employees. So I agree with you on that. I would have wanted to see more on ethics, and I would have also wanted to see more on between ethics and the policy of the company. And the reason why I say that is that I always like to make a distinction between what is ethical, how far is what is ethical, and does ethics go beyond the law of the company and the policies of the company? Because when we expand the company a bit, and when we get it a bit more mechanized, and when we infuse structure, right? I would have wanted to see if that infused structure would then limit, the character and the personality of the employee in determining the culture, But by and large, I know that Dr. Oke is a stickler for timing. Yeah. By and large, I generally agree with the pattern and direction of the presentation, but just as like an action learner that you are, I'll definitely have points of reflection, particularly when I am involved, or when I directly, influence my company, which is a small business, about 15 of us, when it comes to the culture of the company. So let me now take it a bit away from your presentation now. And because, as an action learner, I understand that we constantly have to reflect. Yeah. Let me take it a bit away from your presentation now and situate it to the context of Nigeria. Am I allowed to do so, Dr. Oke? Uche, do you give me the permission to do so?
If you can do it in 1 minute, then you're allowed to.
Yes, I'll do it in 1
minute. Of the time. Thank you.
And take it to the I would like to ask Uche, because I like your presentation, and I believe that people like you will play good and deeper roles in our climb. What do you think will save Nigeria? Do you think that it will necessarily be the constitution, or will it be deepening of our values? And what role do you think leaders will play in that? So if I will repeat it, what do you think will save Nigeria? Will it necessarily be the law or the constitution, or will it be the deepening of our values? And what role do leaders have to play in that? Thank you very much for the time and opportunity. Yeah, and good morning to you all again.
Thank you so much, Yinka. I really appreciate it. To everyone, please send in your questions using the Q&A button. Otherwise, you can type them in the chat box. And I see some questions are already coming in. And Yinka, you asked a question about Nigeria, which is interesting. I was thinking you were going to talk about Nigerian organizations, but you're talking about the country in a sense.
Yes, because because that's where we are at now, you know, and I'm sorry, you know, I asked if I could take it out of context. So if I have taken it out of context, I'm sorry for that. Yeah. But Nigeria is on everybody's mind.
Yeah, just like every other country, yes. I see some other questions here, and Uchechi, I'm going to direct this to you while we get feedback on the first question from Yinka. This is from Peter Kuti. He says, yes, that's a wonderful presentation and the bane of many organizations. Unfortunately, leaders adopt a whole lot of wrong cultures for the fear of meeting up with delivery and satisfaction. And then we see other questions as well, other comments as well from Peter Ogukunle. Says the answer to Mr. Folami's questions are right there in the questions. So he basically says you have already answered your question by talking about the rule of law, the leadership, the constitution, and all of that. So, of course, when we're talking about national culture, it's a completely different concept from organizational culture, but still important. Felix Zonde, in the African context, people will rather employ for the sake of reducing the unemployment rate. How can a company navigate employing the right person with an acceptable culture versus the status quo, reducing the unemployment rate? So I'm going to direct that to you, Uchechi. In an African context, people will rather employ for the sake of reducing the unemployment rate. They see giving people a job as an opportunity to help the society. How can a company navigate employing the right person with an acceptable culture versus the status quo that is just helping to reduce unemployment? Uchechi?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Oke. Okay, everything really rises and falls on leadership, because if one establishes a company, like a private company, why would you want it to fail by bringing in people who cannot even deliver on the job? You need to bring in people who have not just the competencies, but align with your value. Employment should not be about, it should not be about favors, doing favors, except that company has no mission. And we can see, especially in our client, where people are employed for various reasons other than competency, maybe where they're from, maybe that kind of thing, who their father is, who their mothers are. What's the result? We have a whole lot of incompetency everywhere. We have unproductive organizations. We have a lot of wastage. And so if it is a private organization that has a mission, that has a reason why it was established, if it's a profit center, then you don't want to bring on board anyone that will not align and add value and be productive. So I don't know if I've answered that question.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Uchechi. And I'm a bit curious because I see a lot of the questions are coming about Nigeria, Africa, in terms of that's trying to employ people to help the society develop. Does this happen in Europe as well? Do you know? The European organizations, do you see the possibility? And not just from Uchechi, we can also get answers from other panelists as well. Is it possible that people might be employing people just to give them an opportunity to get a job rather than looking at the cultural alignment of that person? So Uchechi, you can get any comments, or Tuan or Annette, anyone can answer on that.
Well, yeah, basically it's all the same. So in Europe, there's not too much different culture-wise than it is what we've heard just yet. And yes, of course, employers and employees are looking for that match in culture from the beginning. And it's hard for even Europeans to come into a company that culturally doesn't match up. So that's basically what's happened.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We have quite a few questions and very little time. So if we don't take your question today, I promise you we're going to get an answer published when we are publishing the video and on our website as well. You'll be able to read your questions answered. But let me try and see if I can combine the two questions from Peter Kuti and from Uwaifo Ujo. What drastic steps can we take to dislodge the end justifies the means mentality of many organizational leaders? What drastic steps can we take to dislodge that mentality? The end justifies the means. Uchechi, in your presentation, you talked about goal-oriented leaders that don't really care about ethical behavior. And I see another question again from Siaforo Kishimbo, a good friend of mine. He says, ethics and the leader, ethics, culture, there's policy, ethics, and the leader. How do we integrate the three? So end justifies the means, ethics, policy, and the leader. How do we marry all of these together? So if you can take comments from you, Uchechi, and comments from Yinka as well, will be fun.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Okay. All right. Mr. Yinka, you want to say something?
Yes, just quickly, maybe as a background and public will help you. When I saw that question, that was exactly, my thoughts when I started to say, because I run a small business and I know that my character plays a lot and how I relate plays a lot. But when you start getting big, it starts getting mechanized and then you need policies to define. I believe that's what that questioner is asking. So what role, does structure and policy play at that point? Yeah. Does it start to eat into the character and relationship and personality of the leader? So that's where I also was going. So I align with that question. As you grow, as the company grows and becomes more mechanized, what role does structure and policy play?
All right. Thank you. Structure and policy are there. They're important. They're very relevant, especially to the life of the organization, the continued existence of the organization. However, the real experience of the company lies in its ethics, its culture. So you can't have leaders who do not believe in what your policies and your structure intends to achieve. So what it means is that if I have dual control, for instance, if I have a dual control policy on my where I keep my cash, now it is because no single person should have that access, because I don't want to find out how honest you are. So I have put a block to ensure that you don't have access to the vault alone. If as a leader, I don't believe in that policy, in that process, in that procedure, then I'm going to be looking for every way to circumvent that. So why do you want to take on? Because I think for me, my biggest takeaway with this is don't bring in someone that does not align ab initio. I've been employed in certain places, and I am aware that questions were asked concerning me in the background. It had nothing to do with the interview panel. It had to do with, oh, we're thinking of bringing on board someone from this organization. What do you know about this person? And I remember speaking with a friend a few days ago who said, oh, she was in an interview panel. She's an instructor in a school, and she said someone came in and that she had worked with that person over a decade ago, and all she could remember about the person was eating the children's food.
Wow.
Of course, that person didn't get the job, but we're talking about don't let them in, and if they are in, your policies, your structure must be strong enough. But ultimately, it lies on the leader. I don't know if I have a minute. I saw a story of a large organization where the compliance officer was asked to leave. Why was he asked to leave? Because he brought up a fraudulent case where the head of the institution was apparently fine with whatever it was going on. Now he was penalized. He was dismissed for bringing it up. So the problem is that that leader shouldn't be there in the first place, because if the leader is not compliant with the real value that the founders have, then nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to happen. They're going to invent every policy, every procedure. So just don't bring them on board.
Thank you, Uchechi. Thank you so much. We indeed have run out of time, but your answers have been so wonderful. Thank you. And we do have a few more questions. So very interesting topic. A few more questions and comments in the chat box and in the Q&A. But we will answer these questions online. So please be on the lookout for when this episode is published online. Next week, we shall have Krista Robine and Caroline Gomulia, we'll be talking about stakeholder engagement, building trust and relationships. Stakeholder engagement, building trust and relationships. But before we wrap up, I want to thank everybody for making today wonderful. Thank you so much, Uchechi, for your presentation. And Yinka, thank you for the reflection as well. For the lovely audience, your participation, your questions, your comments. Thank you so much. Thank you to Team BSN, so our corporate partners, the Culture Factor Group, Change Global. Thank you all. We look forward to seeing you next week for another edition of Good Morning BSN. And please ensure to visit our website. You can catch previous episodes of Good Morning BSN, and you can see articles as well on the previous presentations and meetings that we have had. We look forward to connecting with you. Do stay in touch, and have a nice day. See you next week. Thank you.